Hi there everybody. Today I want to talk a little bit about a concept that I've just sort of started thinking about over the last few years, and this last couple of weeks even just really reflecting on the power of self-hatred. And I think self-hatred is so pervasive in our culture and that it's almost a virtue. It's unseen. It's like this foul odor that we've all become used to and no longer can pick up. But self-hatred, I hope I can share with you today, is so corrosive to self-confidence, our ability to be authentic, and our ability to really connect with others. So I hope you join me today as I try to explain to you what self-hatred is and how you can be free from it. Hi there, this is James on Upgrade Me. Thanks for joining me. Today I want to talk about self-hatred. And I think one of the worst aspects of self-hatred is that it lurks so deeply in our subconscious that we're not even aware of it. But it continuously corrodes our ability to be authentic, our ability to connect with others, our ability to understand ourselves, and leaves us feeling empty and cold and low on confidence. Because self-hatred is undetectable to some degree, or remains hidden to some degree, it's like a traitor in the midst that needs to be drawn out. So because self-hatred is a hidden enemy, we have to understand how to draw it out. I want you to think about it this way: if you can't accept yourself, how are you going to be happy, or how are you going to make other people happy? You know, personally, I have fed the fires of self-hatred in myself, totally unaware, and I've called it virtue. I've called it being humble. I've called it being selfless. And it's only the last few years that I've seen this type of self-help as really being self-sabotage. You know, one of the things that I'm really learning recently, over the last couple of years anyway, is that self-authenticity is probably one of the main purposes in my life. You know, if I am not able to be authentic, if I'm not able to share the flame of consciousness that I am with the world, then what's the purpose of being me? And so one of the foundations, I think, for me personally anyway, one of the things I believe is so important to work on is being authentic. Now, if I have self-hatred in myself, if there's aspects of myself that I've rejected, how am I going to be authentic with myself and with others when aspects of myself are not even open to who I am? So let's just think a little bit about how self-hatred starts. And I want you to imagine a child who's just expressing themselves in a pure moment of expression, of flow. They're just showing who they are. You know, it could be, you know, you see kids, they're just dancing and they're singing, and there's no falseness about it. It's just an expression of who they are in that moment. The way that that child is accepted in that moment of pure self-expression will determine how they view themselves in the world. And there's two ways that they can be shut down into self-hatred. And one is by being shamed in that moment. And the second is that pure act, that flame of consciousness just purely expressing itself in the world can be subverted into performance. So I'll explain both of those. So to start off with, say you've got a child and they're dancing and they're just this genuine expression of themselves. They're not trying to get attention. You know those moments where you see it. Maybe they don't even know they're being watched. It's just a flow of the moment. Now, in that moment, two things can happen. A parent may come along and they're in that performance mindset and they're busy and they're occupied. And for them, that child is just noisy and they're in the way. So they might shut them down with shame. You know, get out of the room. What do you think you're doing? And blah, 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 blah. And then in that moment, the child is shocked. You know, they're shocked because they're just being themselves. One way I've heard, I think it's Brené Brown expressing it, shame is like a child happily bouncing a basketball down the hallway and then someone comes and says, "What are you doing? That's the wrong thing to do." And suddenly shame comes upon us. And in that moment of shame, that aspect of ourselves, so for that child, the expression of their body, the expression of their voice is rejected by a parent and then by themselves. this way of expressing myself isn't okay. I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to push it down into my subconscious. And what happens in that moment is that child starts to self-hate. There's a little aspect of themselves that's no longer acceptable and is pushed down into the subconscious. But the problem is that that aspect of themselves doesn't disappear. That aspect of themselves that wants to be creative, that wants to be expressive, that's confident, still sits there and weeps in a corner, in a dark corner of the subconscious in a sense, and causes pain and causes emotions that if we keep rejecting will form an emptiness within us, inability to really be genuine and authentic within us. And it's called the shadow self. The shadow self is an aspect of yourself that you're not aware of. You've pushed it into subconscious because you've rejected it, because someone else has told you that that wasn't okay. And that's a dangerous place to be, because the shadow self doesn't die. And there are aspects of who you are and your authentic nature that need to be brought back out of that and healed and accepted and developed. Otherwise, those parts become stuck in a childish kind of interaction with the world. There's an emptiness, there's a sense of pain and suffering in that aspect of your being. Another example could be where self-hatred comes in, is that the child may be doing exactly the same thing. They're dancing and they're singing, and mum comes in and goes, "Oh, you're such a good dancer. Your dancing is so wonderful." Now, there's nothing wrong, obviously, with praising your child like that. But what can happen in that moment is the child can suddenly start to think, "Oh, you see the change come over them when they're praised in that way." There's a certain change where now that expression becomes a transaction. And a thought may start to go through their mind, especially if they've seen kids being praised on TV and they associate that praise with, "I'm okay now because I'm a good dancer. I'm okay now because I can sing. I wasn't okay before, but now I'm okay because I have some sort of ability." And maybe the next time this child performs, maybe mum goes, "Show dad what you did." There's something lost of the purity of it, because now it's transactional. Look at me, am I okay because of what I can do? And that's another way that self-help, a more subtle way that self-hatred can be formed in us. So what do we do to heal this fragmented shadow self? Now, it's a huge topic. I can't cover it all, and there's plenty of stuff on the internet about it if you're interested. But I think probably the main way we can start to deal with it is to practice radical self-acceptance. Obviously, the opposite to self-hatred is self-acceptance, and it's reintroducing the shadow self back into the conscious mind and welcoming it and seeing it as an authentic expression of who you are. You know, most of the shadow self is made unconscious, is pushed into the unconscious through self-denial, self-rejection of that aspect of ourselves. And so we have to start to learn to hear the muted banging on the wall of that lost child shadow self saying, "Let me out, let me out." And the way we do that is we stop denying or using denial as a way to push away unpleasant feelings and unpleasant experiences in our life. Denial is a really common coping mechanism for us when we're wounded. You know, it's pervasive, and of course it's denial, so you don't even know that you're denying it. You think that there's no problem, but life is showing you at every step that there's something not right. There's an emptiness in us. There's a sadness in us. There's an inability to connect. There's overreaction to circumstances and environments. We do things and we don't know why we're doing them. That's because there's huge parts of our personality which are suppressed and hidden and are still acting subconsciously and subverting us because they want to be heard. And so the only way we can deal with that is going along that road of self-acceptance and starting to sit and accept those feelings in the moment. So one way of doing it, and there's thousands of ways that I've just learned recently and started to practice and found very helpful, is to, when a feeling is coming up that we don't like, it's very common for us to suppress it, to distract ourselves. We don't want to sit with it. It's like the child going, "I'm sad," and us going, "Well, okay, I'll give you some time, but I'm busy." Can you just go, "Daddy's busy," or "Mummy's busy," and that child goes away sad, unconsoled, reconciled. We need to console those weeping aspects of our nature that we've suppressed possibly from childhood. And so how do you do this? One way that I've learned, and just recently, as I said, when the feeling comes, when the negative feeling comes, resist the urge to banish it, because it's unpleasant. We don't like unpleasant feelings. I understand this very well. I'm good at getting rid of bad feelings. Self-help can be used to actually stop feeling the things that we don't like. Positive focus, all of these types of self-help techniques can actually stop us accepting the shadow self and dealing with it and integrating it. So when the emotion comes up, sit with it. Be present with it. Breathe through it to remain present, to remain in the body. Just breathe calmly and just allow that feeling to sit. And even just allowing the feeling can actually be quite healing, can actually start to reintegrate that shadow self. Then once you've done that and really sit, just allow the intuitive part of you to suggest when you've last felt that feeling. Okay, and when that comes, just let it occur. Don't search for it. Don't get too much in your head. Just allow it to be offered by your intuition, because your intuition is often a part of your subconscious being expressed. That aspect of you that's knocking and saying, hey, there's something wrong. Because remember, emotions are just flags. They're just colours. Emotions are tags of past thoughts and experiences. And so when you recognize that particular little tag, it kind of can evoke a circumstance that happened. So you can ask, when did that happen last? And then look at what is offered up and think, where did I reject myself in that moment? Or what is that emotion saying to me? Then once you've come up with some scenario, and I'll give you an example for myself in a minute, then go back and say, when did I first feel that? And just allow it to be offered up. Don't push it. Don't just let it happen. And if something comes up, it may not, because it may be in a part of your conscious mind that didn't even have rational thought to put words to it, but just allow an image, allow a memory to come up. And then again, ask yourself, how did I self-reject in that moment? What caused that feeling? Can I reframe that memory to be more accurate? So I'll give you an example. Just last week, I was actually driving to work and I started to think about this topic, and I realized I was feeling anxiety. And so I sat with the feeling and I breathed through it. And it sort of changed a bit, and it turned into almost like shame, a little bit of shame. And I asked that feeling, you treat it like a lost part of yourself, an emotional body, a child within yourself. And so what are you trying to say? Or when did you last feel that feeling? And then I remembered early on the week before, I'd experienced a child who'd been quite rude, and it actually made me feel ashamed of myself. And so I sort of sat with that, and I thought, what part of myself have I rejected? So I said to myself, when did you first feel that feeling? And after a little while, memories came back of being a high school student and being bullied and shamed and put down, And it sort of occurred to me, and I realised that what had happened was, in that moment as a young teenager, because of my passivity and my inability to be confrontational and to push back and defend myself, the part of myself had been shamed and undefended. A part of myself had lost faith that I was able to defend it and keep it safe from being bullied and shamed. And that part of me was my more sensitive, more emotional, more relational aspects of who I was. And so there was a part of me, the relational, the sensitive part of me, that I had rejected and pushed down because I was unable to defend it, and I didn't like the feelings it was giving me. And so I pushed it down and I denied it. And that has outflows in your life. If you're unable to accept a part of yourself, for me, that more sensitive relational part, I would use my ability to self-control, what I'd learned from self-help and personal development, to actually suppress the parts of me and defend the parts of me that wanted to relate. And so I wouldn't relate with the same depth and with the same openness and the same liberty, and therefore people couldn't experience me as I am. They would feel frustrated because they were getting to a wall where there's this defense, this denial, this subconscious, conscious boundary, where behind that there's a sensitive James who wants to be part of and wants to belong, but is but is undefended and scared that it won't be protected, so it won't come out. And so I had to start to realize, okay, I'm sorry that I haven't defended myself. I need to push back a little bit more, and I'll try to do better. I need to be open, I need relationship, I need to be vulnerable. That part of myself needs to come back and integrate. And just in that moment, you may not feel better, you might feel worse, but there's a starting of integration. That part of you that's in the basement of your subconscious and banging on the wall is now out, and it can start to talk to you, and you can deal with that and integrate that back into your personality, so it's no longer subverting you, it's no longer sabotaging you, it's no longer springing up with reactions or hindering relationship depth. And so, you know, that's just a little example. We call this shadow work, and it's been around for a long time. Carl Jung talked about it a lot. Shadow work is the shadow self is any part of yourself that you've denied and rejected, and it just needs to be brought out. It's not necessarily a negative aspect, it could be a positive aspect of yourself, but every aspect of yourself, positive, negative, needs to be reintegrated before there can be healing and wholeness and the ability to be truly authentic. True authenticity is, I believe, the primary purpose of our existence, to be who we are, to express the consciousness that we are. If we want to go down the journey of self-help, self-development and growth, we must start to deal with self-hatred. Self-hatred must be looked at. Those aspects of self must be integrated if we want to be whole and happy and connected. So I hope this has helped a little bit with you today. If this is a video that you know someone else would really benefit from, why don't you share it with them? It'd be really great to hear comments back, liking. Check out my website, upgrademe.life. I've got all my articles on there. Check me out on Instagram, Upgrade Me Mentor, Mindset Coaching, and I'm also offering 45-minute free sessions. So go on my website, on Facebook, Upgrade Me, and book in for my 45-minute sessions. You know, there's limited spaces for that, so if you're keen, get in as soon as possible. And a lot of people who do that find it really helpful, and I can maybe help you start to do a bit of the shadow work. Also, I've got an audio series, How Our Mind Creates Reality. Go on to upgrademe.life and you'll see the audio series there, and I'll also put in the links. Subscribe, and love to hear you, putting out new videos every week, so please comment, and I'd love to hear from you. Have a good week.